Our topic today for our training and our podcast is a discussion about things that we should and should not say as home watch providers. And I have a special guest today, and it's my friend Rebecca Pate, and she's a property appraiser, a property appraiser. Rebecca, tell them a little bit about your background.
Okay, so to begin, I've been an a certified appraiser for 30, going on 38 years. I hope that doesn't give away my age. So I am a designated SRA and AIRS member of the Appraisal Institute and have had my share of serving on boards and committees in the appraisal field, as well as having met you in your course. And it was a wonderful course. So I'm very happy to be able to have a cross conversation.
Wonderful. And you took the classroom training some years ago. And the reason I do these educational segments is I am privileged to have conversations with so many people that have great info to share. And I think it's cool to do it conversationally instead of me taking notes and writing it down that way. So what does a property appraiser do?
On a property appraiser's primary job is to assist in collateralizing loans. A large portion of my client base is lending and attorneys, CPAs, people who would use the services of a property evaluator or valuator.
So an evaluator is kind of the same term?
They can be used interchangeably. Okay. There is a difference between an evaluation and appraisal, but it requires someone who has valuation background.
Okay, and you get through you have a lot of foundational and continuation training, don't you?
About 38 years at it. Yes, ma'am.
Holy cow. Well, the reason that it's appropriate that I'm speaking to a property appraiser about this is because I learned not that long ago about one heck of a situation that an appraiser went through. And one of the things that happens in the world of home watch is there's a lot of terminology and jargon that gets misused. So I have a few soapbox items. And the number one soapbox item is the word inspect or inspector. And our industry of home watch is notorious for using those couple words. From day one, and I've been training since 2008, I have suggested, warned against, and said that we really shouldn't use these words. I don't know if people think I just do this for the heck of it, but that's not true. There are legal ramifications and unintended consequences. So the one that I learned about not that long ago happened to be in your industry. And I'm going to paraphrase some of the stuff here. And it was written by somebody who has been a consultant for an E&O company, which is insurance, errors and omissions. And it said, we just had an arbitration where the buyer was awarded a $385,000 judgment against the appraiser for using that one word. And that one word is inspect. The appraiser in their paperwork even included a language that said the appraiser is not a home inspector. But the buyer testified that they only read the part of the report that relied on the fact that the appraiser did an inspection. They said, therefore, the appraiser did an inspection and recognized in this case it was a failing foundation, it would have impacted the value. So part of your job, if I'm not mistaken, as an appraiser is to let them know what the value of a property is. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So one wrong word screwed all of this up.
Yeah. And there's a very fine line between the words.
Yeah.
In basic category and between inspection and observation. In my industry, we call those objective terminology. Objective doesn't mean you object. It means the person saying the word has to be objective in saying the word. So under an objective terminology, an appraiser should observe a property because that is part of an appraisal process. We have to observe or go see
Mhm.
a property so that we know what we're appraising to collateralize the value.
To collateralize the value. That's a very official term there. So we, in Home Watch, basically we observe and report. We check the property, we monitor the property. I tend to use the word check. I use check and observe. I'm thinking those are okay, aren't they?
Those are very objective terms because it does describe what you do without implying. If you look up the word inspection, it implies a more thorough type of observation. So
I like the way you say that because and that's for one of the first times I've looked at it the way you just explained it, because I generally will tell folks that home inspectors, at least in the state of Florida, are licensed. They have a much different criteria than us. And Home Watch, as of the time of this podcast, is not a licensed entity. So we should not confuse ourselves with an industry that's licensed. We can't use their words.
I agree. A home inspector is also licensed.
Exactly. The home inspector. Exactly. Yeah. Home watchers are not, home inspectors are. And they're going in attics, they're checking electrical, they're checking things that we wouldn't even know how to touch.
They're climbing on roofs.
Yeah, we're not climbing on roofs. Our insurance doesn't even cover us going to attics, which is great for me because I'm afraid of heights. So this works out great for me.
First of all, an attic is hot in Florida, so you don't want to go in there for that reason. But
True.
you are really on the level of going back to your training that I went through. You are more of an observer than an inspector because you're not necessarily checking okay, let's take a breaker box, for example. You may turn on and off a switch, but that's an observation. It's not an inspection where you took the panel off and observed the wiring going to the switch. That's the difference.
That's a great thing to point out. And even as you know, as Home Watch reporters, we have our tools of the trade because we may check for possible moisture. We're checking humidity, but our tools are very, very basic. They're not the quality of a home inspector or a professional in the different professions. And therefore, we even have to be responsible of how we talk about our tools of the trade, and that shouldn't talk about them that much. But our tools are to confirm a suspicion, and then we contact and connect the homeowner with the right professional.
Yes, and that is true even of an appraiser, because what we are observing the improvements for is so that we can get an overall picture of the property in order to compare it to other properties for the valuation. And about 10 years ago, my professional organization, the Appraisal Institute, sent out a memo explaining objective terminology to a point where I had started using the word observe maybe 10 years ago, where I was previously using the word inspection. Mm-hmm. But once it becomes offensive to one party who sues you, then the whole profession no longer should use the term. So I agree that it's good when in your training that you're trained not to actually differentiate the difference between what is an observation and an inspection.
Exactly. In my training style, because I've been self-employed a long time like you, I've been self-employed since 1986, for goodness sakes. And if there's anything a business owner knows about, it's practicing risk management. In the world of Home Watch or any of our professions, the first level of risk management is our education. The second one is a great contract. And the third one is your insurance. And we do number 1 and 2. So we never need number 3, because if you're filing a claim on your insurance, that means you're getting sued.
That's the same in the appraisal profession.
Yeah. So it's just funny to me that I'll have home watchers sometimes argue with me the validation, the validity of all of this. Here, let me get tongue tied. But I initially, as I mentioned, started going against use of the word inspection because it wasn't proper. But now there's legal precedent, and at the end of the day, and this little old lawsuit kind of proves it, the client's perception is your reality.
Exactly. And I will also tell you that there have been multiple lawsuits for that very reason.
In
the
your-
appraisal profession.
in your-
Read about one, but there are hundreds.
For saying inspection or even other terms?
For using the word inspection is what I'm specifically referring to.
Wow.
But under objective terminology, we're not even allowed to say the word desirable, like the neighborhood is desirable for this or that reason. We have to use an objective term that demonstrates anti-bias. So there are a lot of other words besides inspection that one might be careful of.
Home watch back when I started was definitely a hobby thing, and then it became a profession. Now I do use the word industry because we are definitely an early stage industry. And we who are operating professionally trained, certified companies have a responsibility for being true to the message and building a solid foundation. And I appreciate this. I'm still going to stay on my soapbox about a lot of stuff, but you're further validating this. And if anybody listens to this and really thinks about it, talks to their attorney, and still uses the word inspection, it's expect the consequences. It's gonna. And if somebody in our industry, our home watch industry, gets sued for this, it hurts every other home watcher out there.
It does.
All of them.
It really does. And it will precipitate change, but it's a shame that such a simple thing as the difference between observe, which is just going in and seeing, as opposed to inspect, which is getting deeper into the problem or the specifics. I mean, you're not going to pull a washing machine out of the wall from away from the wall unless there's water under the machine. So why would you say you inspected it?
None of that. So the word inspection, home watchers that are listening to this, is wrong. It's undebatable. If you're going to use it, it's at your own risk. It's irresponsible, period. And that's according to the...
Well, unless you like getting sued.
Yeah, and you get sued, then it's like, oh gosh, Diane and Rebecca and the attorneys and everybody else were right, and everybody else had preceded us. So I oftentimes, one of my favorite phrases is success leaves clues. So I talk to other successful people like yourself, and you're leaving us a very important, not only advice, but a clue. You're in a long-term industry that you've learned not to do this, and you sharing it with the home watch industry will save a lot of people from getting in a pickle.
Well, I do hope it helps.
It definitely helps. So far be it from me to get off the soapbox totally here without saying the other words that people shouldn't say. We're done with inspect. We should not say license. Currently, except maybe for one state in the union, there's no license specific to home watch. I'm tired of arguing with people that say I have a business license. It's a freaking business tax receipt. You pay $50 for it. I don't know in all the other states or in Canada, but it's not a license specific to home watch. But Diane, I have this kind of license or that kind of license. Well, that license belongs to this or that. So the client's perception is your reality. I find it misleading. In the same vein as inspection, we should not be saying property manager or property management. Those are different duties, different regulation. No, you're not a project manager or you're not managing a project. It's to keep yourself and your risk management in line. You've got to be vague by design and specific by design, and you've got to use the right terminology. So, yep, I am good with that. Any other examples that you can think of, Miss Rebecca?
I had a personal encounter it's probably been 25 years ago now, where I had the term that someone other than myself used on a property I had appraised, and it was crime ridden. And so I actually had a phone conversation with the head of Fannie Mae, and I don't know who I'm helping with this, but I think the term objective terminology needs to really resonate with people, because I had that conversation because I knew I couldn't use the term crime ridden, and the house had bullet holes in it. And hopefully around here, nobody's going to have that problem.
Yeah.
But the advice I was given from this chief of Fannie Mae, which is a pretty high position, was just say what it is. Just say what it is. And that's a pretty simple statement. But he said, say what it is. So I put in my report, this house has bullet holes in it. But here's the problem. Okay, that's the solution. But here's the problem. If I say crime ridden, and this applies to appraisal more than home watch, but if I say a term like that, it refers to people. So you need to be very, very precise on your terminology where it has to do with judgment of people or something in their property that you don't want to mention in any kind of reporting that might be a bias statement that has to do with people. So that would be the only thing I would add, because I see that there might be some occasion to make some off the cuff remark that somebody might be offended by. So that's why the term objective terminology is so important, because objective means you have no bias.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the difference between the terms observe or see or looked at, or how you put it earlier, is an objective term as opposed to inspect, which is it's non-objective or subjective, because the person hearing it can perceive it as something other than what you meant. But if you say, I saw this, instead of I inspected this, they can only assume you saw it.
It's so important. You know, I'm not going to say that I understood from day one how important it is to say all of the right words or anything, but you learn that as you go on, and it's our responsibility to teach people that. But I will add our particular segment to the Home Watch Academy, but I'm going to do more on objective terminology, and objective terminology is now going to be part of my terminology. It even goes back to what we learned in class when we did our mold training. You should call it microbial growth. You shouldn't call it mold. So it's all of that. And when it comes to Home Watch, we, again, being the early adopters and the innovators of the home watch industry, until we clearly define ourselves and differentiate between home watch, property management, house sitting, and home inspection, we're not going to become known. And if you use terms from another profession, you can't get upset at the homeowners or the legal system when they don't understand who you are, because it's your own darn fault because you don't know what your own business does.
Exactly.
I think we talked some good stuff, Rebecca. I think we talked some good talk and shared some very important information. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time and your expertise.
You're welcome, and I wish you and your students well.
We'll do our best to keep them away from an insurance claim or worse. Thank you.
Thank you.